All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for bearing with us while we took care of all of the technical issues to make this work. I would like to introduce to you Clara Mbasisya. Did I do that right, Clara?
Yeah.
And she's going to be speaking on building better relationships with nature. And I'm going to turn the time over to her. Oh, one additional thing. With questions and answers at the end, those of you who are on Zoom, please put your questions in the Q&A, and those of us in person, I will be repeating the questions so that those people who are on Zoom will be able to hear the questions, and Clara will be able to hear the questions too. So turn it over to you, Clara.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope we're doing wonderful. I am Clara Mbasisya, and today I wanted to share with you my journey finding nature. So a bit of a context for this story is that 6 years ago, I left my home country, the Democratic Republic of Congo in Central Africa, and I came here to continue with university. I wanted to add a few pictures of my hometown, Goma. It's in the east part of the Congo. And through these pictures, you can see that there are no many green spaces in the city itself. And the city is relatively flat, although we have the Lake Kivu, but most people do not necessarily spend time interacting with the natural world, because I don't know if you can see in this picture, most of the houses that are built next to the shore of the lake are really private, and also like hotels and stuff like that. So regular people do not necessarily have access to the lake as a natural place, and we don't necessarily have trees or anything like that. In the background, you can see some mountains, but when you are actually in the city, you cannot really see them. So I think depending on the angle that these pictures were taken, you can see that there is a diverse landscape, but when you're in the city, you do not really feel that presence. I wanted to contrast it to Manchester. That's where I live here. You can see clearly the difference in the place that nature in general takes into these two cities. So in Goma, growing up there, I never really had to think about nature, contrary to when I moved here in Manchester. Almost everything just makes you think about nature, the river and all of that. So that's like a bit of the background for how I started my journey with nature. So going back into the story, it's actually started in fall 2021. As an environmental student, I was taking a class, freshwater science, and we had an assignment one day, which was about working in teams and finding a stream or a river where we should have made like observations and answering different questions really about it. But I think the way that the assignment was designed, it was for people who live in Keene or surrounding areas to Keene. But for me, who was living in Manchester and I didn't have a car, I still don't have a car, it was a little bit difficult for me to actually participate in this assignment. Even though I could have had like a classmate who could be like my partner, I think it would have been difficult for them as well to work on this because their partner is just so far away. So I decided to talk to the professor and explain to her a bit about my situation and how difficult it would be. And fortunately, we agreed that I could do this assignment on my own if I could find like a stream or do my observation on the Merrimack River in Manchester. And so that's basically what I did. So the site that I observed, here's just a few pictures of it. That's how it looks like for most of summer and beginning of September and stuff like that. It's just next to the road when I'm coming to school. But I think because of its appearance here, you would not even think that there is a stream just behind these trees. Here's just a different view of the stream itself in April, where you can actually start seeing what is happening beyond the trees. I also wanted to add these pictures to try and show a bit of the stream itself, because the initial assignment was to make this observation on the stream itself and how it might be changing and why it's behaving the way it does. But by the end of the semester, the assignment was already completed. But for some reason, I kept just going out there to the same spot week after week, making my observations. And for the first 3 to 4 months, I didn't really see any wildlife. I was just seeing tracks, different tracks. I think because it was like winter, so most of the animal wouldn't really show. But when spring started and summer, that's when I could start seeing more of the living thing coming back, the birds, the deers, and all of that. And so up until today, I still go to the same place every week, making my observations really to just keep learning from this place. I did receive different questions, people asking me, why did I keep going out there? Although the assignment was done and today is like a year over. But I think there are many reasons, but the biggest one was really just the curiosity that it brought up in me, because as we saw in the previous pictures of my hometown, you wouldn't really find like nature almost undisturbed right there next to your house. So being out there, seeing the stream, seeing the trees and all of that was really, really interesting for me. The other thing is all of these trees, all of these animals and everything really was different for me, because from back home, it's a completely different landscape, completely different climate, and you find different trees and different animals. So when I was going here, everything was new to me. So the trees, the animals, and all of those things, I didn't know them. So I was curious to just learn or just recognize them, because for most of my time out there, I didn't know the names of the trees or anything. So I was writing my observation like in French, because that's like my third language. So English is like my fourth language. So because I didn't know the names, I would try and describe them, but in a language that I would recognize. So that kept me going out there, but also for my other classes, because as I was learning, I felt like going out there, seeing these observations for myself, these natural processes for myself, helped me with my classes, understanding more of what was explained. Because as I said, English being like my fourth language, I did not necessarily understand or I still don't understand everything that the teacher would say in class, but because I've probably seen that in nature, it becomes easier for me to like associate what they're saying with what I've seen. So that was also one reason why I kept going back there. So over the year, observing this and taking pictures, writing, wherever I was noticing, at some point I started posting pictures of them on social media. And because most of my audience is still in Africa, because that's where my family is, my friends are, we started having conversation. People were curious about this because in Congo, we do not really have this sense of talking about the environment. And so when I would tell other people that I am studying environment, they would be surprised because you don't have people studying the environment in Congo. You know, they would ask me like, what are you going to be doing? You know, there are no jobs for the environment because they do not exist yet in Congo. But over time, we started having these conversations, talking about the utility of nature, why we should preserve them, preserve nature in general. And we ended up creating this platform that I call Blue Green, where we meet up with communities, schools, farmers, and all of that, started telling them about why they should preserve nature or just be curious about it. And so since spring 2022, we've been working with this particular village, for example, where we noticed that they were like cutting down most of their trees to make charcoal, but they did not know how to grow different trees. They were just like waiting for nature to replenish itself, but it was not happening. So we wanted to teach them a little bit of how they should learn to grow their own trees and replace the old ones. So what have I learned from this journey in general? I learned that not being able to participate to the assignment with others in Keene as I would have wanted wasn't such a bad thing after all, because it helped me try to find nature where I was. And it's also helped me think of how most of the time we think of nature and feel like we have to go for a trip. We need to travel to be in nature, when the thing is we can find nature almost wherever we are. Also understanding that I didn't start this project or this journey with a fixed idea of where I would be in 1 year of observations, but just making these observations and being able to share them and how it affected communities back home, you know, in a different environment, different culture, and all of that. So for me, this is really a circular story, because my curiosity to learn more about the environment here was really fueled by the background that I had, or lack thereof, back home, not really paying attention to nature, and coming to a different place where it's like you have to pay attention to nature. Like the seasons are going to be changing, you have to dress according to the season and all of those things. So also learning from here and being able to communicate that with other people back home, planting trees, having conversation with students about the environment, all of that, I feel like it has become like a circular story, where now when I'm talking about my story here, I also have to include what the other people are doing back home. So yeah. the other aspect of how I see this to be a circular story is that, like, today I'm explaining this, saying that it's my journey, but I feel like I cannot really say that it's only my journey, because I'm also presenting the journey of this site for 1 year of observations. When I'm out there in nature making these observations, I'm not necessarily writing about myself. I'm writing about the land and what the trees did, what the deers did, where they went through, and why, probably. So I cannot really separate my own story in here with the story of what the land was doing. And so it becomes also, in a different way, a circular story. I think that this is an ongoing story, because wherever you are, in Manchester or in Congo, regardless of what is around you, we can still find nature. And what I realized is that developing better relationship with nature can be as simple as just being willing to observe, because that's all I have been doing for the past year, just going out there, observing and writing about it. And so it's an ongoing journey, because I also think that I haven't learned all there is to learn about nature. I'm still excited for next year and the ongoing years where I'll be learning from nature. So I would want to acknowledge all of these people for helping me prepare this presentation, answering my questions, I would say, and helping me understand, like, learning the names of the trees and all of these things, because, as I said, I used to just write them in French without giving them their true names. And yeah, and also wanted to say thank you, although people are not here, everybody from Blue Green who has been advancing, I think, maybe my ideas back home, planting those trees, although I've actually never met them, but we keep working toward this idea of the environment. Yeah, so I think that's really all for me today.
Thank you, Clara. That was wonderful. Do we have any questions for her? Yes.
What has been your most memorable experience going out exploring?
She asked, what has been your most memorable experience of going out and exploring?
Yeah, I think the most memorable, maybe two of them, was probably the first week that I went out there, because I kept getting lost, didn't find my way. And also on week 50, I was just out there making observation, and it was like, for the first time, all of the animals that I've been wanting to see were just out there, you know, like all the birds were out there, much more than what I would see regularly. So that was really a memorable time for me, to see so many species just being out there for that one single day.
Yes.
Did you always go at the same time, or did you go at different times of the day?
Did you always go at the same time, or did you go at different times?
I went at different times, different days, but it was mostly after 7 days. Sometimes it would be Saturday, sometimes it would be on Sunday, but I got to see it really early in the morning, around 6 a.m., sometimes around 9, and sometime later in the day.
Other questions? Yes.
So Clara, because we've worked together already, so I want to encourage you to comment on the work that you're also doing to address that point that you had made about living in Goma, how it's hard to be a part of nature. It's hard to observe that. And so you've been working with some of your colleagues to think about ways to address that. I wonder if you want to make a comment about that, about the work that you're doing in the school systems as well.
Yeah, so yeah, as I mentioned, I think the Blue Green Project is really a project that we created to try and help communities start to pay attention to nature. As we said in this example, when people do not understand that you need to preserve nature, they can just cut down all the forests and it's going to degrade the soil and affect them, you know, on a worse aspect. And so we would reach out to the schools because we were targeting the children. I think they would understand better these new ideas, but also with the older generations, like the farmers, we would try to talk to them as well. But it's much more easier with the student in schools. So we would target the schools much more, depending on how they would understand. I think planting trees was just like the first step before trying to start the conversation with them on much bigger topics like climate change or anything like that. We also work with younger children, like 5 years in school, but we just teaching them how to grow food, just so that they can start caring about the environment in general. So yeah.
Other questions? I have a question, Clara. What's your plan going forward? What are your next steps?
Yeah, so my next step with this project particularly is basically to keep doing this, observing nature, maybe in other places, trying other places as well. But I did appreciate like the idea of going to one place because you get to learn more about it rather than visiting different places for just once. And so I would want to keep observing this same place, but also making time for other places as well. With the Blue Green Project, my way going forward would be to reach out to different schools as well to make it much more accessible to many more children.
Any other questions? Yes.
I was struck by your explanation that you first were describing things in French and using French words to describe what you saw. And that made me, and then you said, well, you learned the real names. But that's a good illustration, perhaps, of the saying that naming something is not the same as knowing it. How would you react to that notion?
I'm just going to share a little bit of what you said so that the people on Zoom can hear it. That you were struck by what she said about knowing the names in French and then learning the real name in English. And that naming is not always the same as knowing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that there's still, I think that it is important to be able to know them because the names I were giving them in French was based on what I've seen, like maybe how it looks like, or what it would make me think of. And so I think it is important to know them that way, from a description of it, but also knowing them from their general name was helpful for me to ask questions properly. So if I wanted to ask a question to a professor, knowing the exact name was easier, rather than just telling them something in French that they would not understand, or a description that would vary from one person to another person. But I think it is important to know both ways, from my own description of the thing, but also from the general perspective of things, so we can have better communication. So I know, or the person understand exactly what I'm asking or what I'm saying. So.
Thank you very much, Clara. I want to let you know that there's a lot of nodding going along in this classroom right now in appreciation for everything that you've shared. Thank you very much.
Thank you.